Welcome to the Recovery Stories podcast, bringing you stories of hope, healing, and triumph over the bondage of addictions, mental health struggles, trauma, and dysfunctional family systems. Our courageous storytellers have chosen to live their journey out loud in order to show others that they don't have to suffer in silence. The stories you will hear are raw, real, and may involve graphic and triggering content. This podcast is brought to you by Promises Behavioral Health's Rooted alumni community. If you or a loved one are struggling, have questions, or are ready to take the next step, call our admission center at 888-648-4098. Or visit us online at www.promisesbehavioralhealth.com. Our team is ready and waiting to answer the call for help.
Welcome to this episode of Rooted Recovery Stories. My name is Patrick Custer, and I'm your host. We are so glad that each and every one of you have joined us, whether it's live or on replay. I'm really excited to kick things off. I've got an incredible guest today, Tim Lodgen here, who's going to share his story with us, and I'm so excited to hear about it. He's made it through some amazing things, and we're just going to dive right in. Tim, welcome to the show.
Hey, Patrick, thanks for having me. I really appreciate you having a platform for allowing me to reach one more person.
Absolutely. You know, we always talk about if it's only one life that's changed or saved, 100% worth it. So if you're watching this or listening to it, you're having a bad day or whatever, and if all this does is encourage you to make one better decision, then our mission is complete. If this encourages you to take a step and ask for help, all that much better. But if you're hearing this and this has any positive influence on your life, then Tim's and my job is complete. And so I hope that touches your heart, because that's our goal. That's the mission of this today. So with that, I want to ask you from the very beginning. I love this question to kick things off with our guests, because for me, I'm a chronological thinker. So when I'm learning somebody's story for the first time, I like to know where things begin. And so for you, when I say, where did things begin? What is your first memory in life, or your first few memories? But I always like to ask, do you remember your first memory?
You know, I have found that I remember a lot more of my early childhood than most people do.
Really?
I'm not sure why, but I would have dreams throughout my childhood of things when I was 2 and 3 years old that most people don't remember.
Wow.
I remember, you know, I grew up with my father and mother up until the age of 6 and 7, and then my father and mother got a divorce. But I remember my third Christmas. I woke up before everybody else. I remember climbing out of my crib, and I go downstairs to where the Christmas tree is, and I open everybody's Christmas gifts.
No.
My father, my mother's, my brother's, and I remember opening them all up, and my mom coming down the steps, and her sheer look of terror that I just opened up like 40 gifts, and only like 10 or 12 were mine, you know?
Yeah.
And that's a specific memory. I actually do remember doing that, which is pretty funny because we still talk about it today. Remember the time you woke up and opened everybody's Christmas gifts?
Man, that's so great. Okay, so you remember that happening. Do you remember, did you know that you were opening other people's gifts, or were you just like, it's Christmas, I'm gonna open everything?
No, I seriously remember opening up the gifts and being like, okay, that's for my brother. I'm gonna sit it over there. Oh, that must be for my dad, for my mom. I'll sit his. I opened them and then prioritized them to whose pile they were. So when they came down, that's your pile, that's your pile, that's your pile. This is my gosh. Pile.
You're thinking you're helping because you're like, Santa brought them, and like, I'm just gonna save us all some time, and there you go.
Yeah, that's one of my earliest memories, which is actually a hilarious one, to tell you the truth.
Wow, that's great, because it's not a negative one. A lot of people I talk to they're like, yeah, my first memory is trauma. I mean, that might have been trauma for your siblings, but
yeah,
I'm just kidding.
And I do have trauma memories as well. But that's like my earliest one that I still remember, like, vividly.
Yeah. So you mentioned your parents not living with them or them getting divorced at an
Yes.
early age. What took place there?
So at 6 years old, I was in first grade, and I remember my parents getting a divorce, and it affected me very, very much as a young little boy growing up without a father. And I have a brother who is almost 11 years older than me.
Mm,
So I'm 6 going on 7. He's 16 and or almost 17 going on 18. For me, I was like, why doesn't my father love me like he loved my brother? Why did he leave me in first grade, but my brother's about to graduate high school? Why did
mm,
he stick around for most of his, childhood into his adulthood, but he leaves me in first grade? What did I do wrong? Did I not listen? Was I not a good boy? Did I not clean my room? I literally thought it was my fault why my parents got a divorce, because how could he stick around for so long for my brother, but he leaves me? It must be my fault. It must be my fault. And I held on to that all the way up until I was like 40 years old. I
wow.
thought it was my fault. And what kind of made it real to me was my father. I in my 20s, I got out of the Marine Corps and I bought a house on the same street as my father. I was 30 houses away from him on the same street. I lived there for 4 years. I saw my dad 3 times.
Oh, wow.
So we've never really had a relationship as far as a father-son relationship, but he always had a nice, really good relationship with my older brother.
Mm,
All 3 of us are military veterans, my father, my brother, and myself. He would call my brother up, take him to gun shows, take him to go see movies, have him over for dinner. Not me. There
wow.
was 11, 12 years where I never even got a Christmas card. Nothing.
Wow.
And all he had to do was literally walk down the street 30 houses and put a card in my mailbox or knock on the door and say, Merry Christmas, this is for you and your wife. Nothing, absolutely nothing. So for such a long time, I was like, well, he wants nothing to do with me, so why would I
Mm,
want anything to do with him?
sure. Well, and that's I think, a natural response when we feel rejection from primary caregiver or those primary relationships in our lives to when separated, it's easier to shut off and say, well, I'm gonna block you out before you can hurt me again. But my gosh, that had to have been tough to deal with. And the messages you internalized, I mean, what beyond just thinking that the initial divorce was your fault, what were those messages that you internalized? Just that you weren't good enough, and so therefore he.
Yeah, I wasn't good enough. He didn't love me. Maybe there's something wrong with me.
Mm,
It helped me to justify my alcoholism and drug addiction
yeah,
when I
that
finally got into that.
leading into a great next question. So genetically, I know there's some. I interviewed somebody recently, who everybody's got their difference of opinion, who said she didn't believe that addiction was genetic, and but just interested. I always like to ask people, based on your family history, do you have mental health and addiction in the family tree? And what was the narrative that your family presented that to you with as a young child? What was your understanding of
So
addiction and mental health issues?
that's a great question. So I'm an alcoholic, addict, and I was diagnosed with bipolar manic depressive disorder at an early age.
Mm,
Growing up in my family, my mother's 73, my father's 76. Growing up, we didn't talk about mental illness. We didn't talk about addiction. It was what happens in the family stays in the family. We don't talk about
mm,
it. I believe my parents' generation were close knit, shameful. You don't speak about what happens behind closed doors. But when we go outside that door, you better have a smile on your face, and we
yeah,
love and hug each other, and everything's peachy keen. You know what I mean? And that's. I mean, my parents grew up in the 30s and 40s and 50s, so I'm
yeah.
that generation. we didn't talk about family issues. Growing up, I never knew my mother's father. I never met him once. I grew up with my pop, which was my mom's stepdad. So he's the only grandfather I really knew. And he had no issues whatsoever. He was a concrete guy for 30 years, drank a beer like maybe on Christmas or a holiday, no issues. I later found out that my mother's biological father was an alcoholic. He molested all three of his children.
Wow.
Not included my mother, because my mother actually did not grow up with him as well. At the age of 10, I think my grandmother divorced the guy and met my step grandfather. But he molested all three of his girls. He was an alcoholic, and he ended up dying at the age of 55 through alcoholism. I didn't find this out until my 30s. Also, on my mother's side, my grandmother, my maternal grandmother, I have two uncles that are her twin brothers. They were alcoholics. Her sister, which I guess would be my great aunt, she had multiple personality disorder and schizophrenia. My mother's brothers and sisters, most of them grew up with alcohol problems, some with drug addiction. Now, my father's side, he's the only child from his mother and father. Interesting enough, my father never met his real father. Wow. My grandmother in World War II got pregnant. And during World War II, my father's from Germany. He didn't come over to the States till he was 18. So my father's side of the family's from Germany. In World War II, my grandmother met a gentleman, got pregnant. She met a Army Ranger or something from the United States. They fell in love for the 2 years or wherever he was over in Germany fighting. And she asked him to use his last name for my father. So Lodgen actually is not my biological family name.
Oh, wow.
We're using a last name from an Army soldier that fought in World War II that met my grandmother. I'm just finding out during my sobriety that my legitimate family last name is Sauter.
Huh.
I'm just finding out that my great-grandfather was an inventor in the late 1800s, early 1900s, owned shoe factories and was a millionaire back in the day. I'm just now finding out my family history from my father's side. And I'm mentioning that because growing up, not having a father around, not knowing my grandfather, not knowing my history from my dad's side, I was lost as a boy. I was lost growing up as a man. What's my family line? What's my family history? Were we successful? Were we not? Like, where do I come from? I was extremely lost with that growing up for a very long time. My father's cousins, who I really grew up as my aunts and uncles, a lot of them had alcohol problems. I didn't see much drugs on that side of the family, but they sure as heck like to drink their beer a lot. So, is it genetic? I believe it does run in the family.
Yeah. Well, I personally think too, it's it doesn't have to be nature or nurture. I think it's definitely both components. If you're exposed to something environmentally long enough, the odds are, what do they say? You sit in a barbershop long enough, you're going to get a haircut. Like,
yeah.
And it only seems to me to make sense that as children, we we look at America and we talk about, oh, it's the land of the free. We have all the the American dream, possibilities for everybody to make what they want of themselves. But if as a child, all of our examples are that our life examples of the closest people to us are people that are medicating, literally just doing things to survive their emotions from day to day. And, many of the things that I'm assuming the family members that you just described probably went through. it only makes sense that the product of that is, because if we, we don't have a role model for what to want, what to long for, what to strive and work for, then how do you as a young person set a goal and try and move in that direction? It only makes sense that we we end
Well,
up with struggles.
well, I will say this: my father retired 37 years as a police officer. He doesn't drink, doesn't do
Wow.
drugs. My mother, she was a professional bodybuilder when I was growing up. No drugs, no alcohol. My brother doesn't drink, has never done drugs. So my immediate family, my father, brother, and mother, none of them drink, none of them do drugs whatsoever. There was no alcohol in my house. There was no liquor in no cabinets. There was nothing. So it wasn't around in my immediate family, but when we would go to family functions and cookouts and things like that,
Mhm.
everybody else in the entire family was drinking and having a good time.
So you were exposed to it. It wasn't really talked about openly. My next question there is, obviously, and I feel like you kind of answered this, which of your caregivers you were closer to, which was, I'm assuming, your mom, right?
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah. And so when we talk about family systems and generational trauma, there's so many we see in social media and so many self-help and all these things, these messages of healing generational wounds, generational trauma, and what have you, that our parents passed down to us. But I saw something that just like wrecked me the other day internally, that said your parents, your parents or your parent may not have corrected, fixed, or healed your generational wounding, trauma, and may have passed some down to you, but they also very well may have healed and fixed and corrected some. And so for me, I sat back and I thought, whoa, I never really, because it's so easy to sit back I'll speak for myself. It's easy to sit back and play the victim and think, God, my parents, like, mom passed me down this like lovely trait that I don't like, that now I'm having to fix. Dad, I get all these from, So this question that I want to ask you is that, like, can you think of something that your mom did that was healing in the process for you, from your family's background, that kind of changed the narrative that would have been if she hadn't done that?
My mother is the strongest person that I have ever met in my entire life.
Mm.
My father, when he left when I was 6, that next year, my mother picked up bodybuilding. For 10 years, she was in magazines, won all these trophies. I met really cool people throughout her, like Lou Ferrigno and Samir Benoot,
Wow.
Mr. Olympia, and Kevin Lavone, who was 3 or 4 times second place Mr. Olympia. Like, all these people come in and out of my house, and she showed me that no matter what happens in life, you pick yourself back up and you continue to go. The first year that my father left, she made $10,000 the entire year, taking care of
Wow.
me and my brother. The next year, she started college. She put herself through college at night school, working during the day and going to school. She ultimately ended up getting her master's degree, working 2 to 3 jobs, and then landing this big, huge vice president job at this huge corporation here in Maryland, and becoming a millionaire in her 30s.
Wow.
Um, while still working a second job at night, because she loved teaching weight training and aerobic weight training to students. So she taught at a college for 36 years. She taught night classes at a college just to give back while she worked a corporate job during the day. She
That's
showed
amazing.
me that no matter what life brings at you, no matter the adversities, no matter how you're grown up, or what's happened in your life, you pick yourself back up and you can accomplish anything in life. And she's told me
Mm.
that since day one. She's always told me, now I don't know if this is a mom talking to her son, but she always told me I was special. She always
Mm-hmm.
told me that I had something more to give than most people. She said, there's something about you that you can help change people's lives. And that is literally one of the reasons why I believe I was lost for so long in drugs and alcohol, because I never knew what it was. I was always searching for that purpose. What
Mm,
is my purpose? What am I
hmm
supposed to be doing? My mom believed so much in me that I could change people's lives. What is it? And I never
hmm
could find it. So I would drown myself in alcohol and drugs to escape the fact that possibly I had a greater purpose that I could not even wrap my head around or completely understand. So she showed me no matter what, you just pick yourself back up. You keep going, you keep going, you keep going. She's
Wow.
amazing.
I can really, so it's interesting that you say that, because I hear the positive from that, and then also how the disease used it to twist some things. And man, can I relate to that so much, because my mom did the same thing. You say, is it a mom thing? I don't know, probably. Sure, not all moms do that. Not all moms teach this resiliency beyond all else. Like, there will be hope. You can make it no matter what. And you're meant for a higher, greater purpose. My mom instilled that in me too, as well, and it did all the same things that you just described. And but when it came, like, late teens, early 20s, when I'm like kind of flailing to find my purpose, because as an addict, like, I think we talk about like this grand sense of self that we carry. I definitely had that. So for
100%.
me, that, on top of mom telling me, that, I'm meant for something big, whatever. And I totally identify with what you just said, because I was like, what is it? There's no roadmap for me. I don't know what it's going to be. And I keep, like, things aren't working out in a direction that's making me feel like I'm super important, because that's what I thought it was. I'm going to be helping people, but also very important. And so, like, okay, I'll just drink and get really messed up instead.
Sounds about right.
So, right. Yeah, man. But when talking about the human psyche, I can't. Who knows where you and I would be today if our moms hadn't instilled that sense of resiliency and hope beyond all else at a young age? Because I have come across, and I'm sure you have too, so many people who did not have that, like, birth to, like, through the developmental years, of the encouragement and reinforcement of finding out the answer. You can do it. Just that, like, everything you described, not having that reinforcement by your mom or primary caregiver, or both your caregivers raising you. And I mean, can that be corrected later in life? It's debatable. People talk about it, but it really screws some people up. So, that's why I say, like, it's like such a positive, but a double-edged sword, because when we talk about addiction, it's like, man, addiction will take and twist a great
Oh,
thing.
cunning, baffling, and manipulative.
Yeah. Yeah. So, all right. So let's move forward a little bit. When we're talking, going through school, when did drugs and alcohol enter the picture for you
Yeah,
personally?
so when my father left, my mom did a really good job. She put me immediately into sports to keep me occupied, to get me into a group, to get me going. So I played baseball for 8 years. I was on a football team for 3 to 4 years. At the end of elementary school, I picked up skateboarding, and I became an extremely, really, really well-known skateboarder here in Maryland. I was sponsored by some companies. I was skating with Brandon Novak and Bucky Lasek. They were both within 10 minutes from my house, so I grew up
Oh,
skating
that's
with those
awesome.
guys. And I've known Brandon since elementary school. We went to the same elementary school, middle school, high school, so I grew up with him. And that was really awesome. And then my middle school, I got into boxing. And, it's funny because I attribute some good things of my addiction to my sports, because when I did skateboarding, I couldn't just be a regular skateboarder. I had to get sponsored. I had to skate with big time people. When I was in
Yeah.
football, I wasn't just a running back. I was the star running back of the football team. In baseball, I was the all-star pitcher. When I started boxing, I became Golden Glove champion and fought in the Junior Olympics and got third place. I took everything to the next level.
Yeah.
And my addictive personality would tell me, you have to train more, keep going, keep going, keep going. I'd show up early, train harder, and stay late. There was no off switch to my addictive personality. But then again, it also correlates with my bipolar disorder too, because I would have these large moments of manic, just go, 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 go. And when I lost the baseball game, like say I didn't strike out the last two people and they hit a home run, that was on me. That was my fault. It wasn't the other 10 players on the team. It was my fault. I did that. Same with the football. I couldn't run an extra 5 yards and score that touchdown. It was my fault. Forget the defense and the offense, but the whole game rested on me. That was completely my fault. So I would take it personally that everything was my fault. But there was no drugs and alcohol in pretty much my whole entire life until I got to ninth grade. My buddy had a first kind of welcome to high school freshman party. So everybody went. And that was the first time I drank alcohol. And I got completely sick. So sick. The next morning, my mom picks me up and she's like, she looks at me getting in the backseat of the car. She's like, you drank alcohol, didn't you? I said, yeah. And she's like, well, I'm not going to punish you. You're going to be sick for today and tomorrow. Your weekend's ruined. So hopefully this will be your lesson not to ever drink again. But we're having a cookout today, and I need 50 ears of corn shucked. So you're going to go in the basement and shuck all 50 ears of corn. Here's a bag for the corn, and here's a bag for you to throw up. Hopefully you'll learn your lesson. So I ended up going home and
learn your lesson and don't get the bags mixed up.
Right. So I had to go home and shuck 50 ears of corn while throwing up in another bag. And it really did deter me. I didn't touch alcohol again until my senior year of high school.
Wow.
Still no drugs. The summer before senior year, I knew my grades weren't good enough to get into college. A lot of the people that were going to high school with were getting into some really heavy drugs, and I didn't want to go down that route. And so I decided to join the United States Marine Corps the summer before senior year. So I was only 17, the delayed entry program. So I knew going into senior year, once I graduated, I was going into boot camp. I figured, let me have some fun this year. Let me go to some parties. Let me have a couple drinks. Maybe I'll try some marijuana or something. Let me get it kind of out of my system. That was my thought process. Let me get it out of my system because next year, shit's going to hit the fan. I'm going into the military. So I started going to parties and started drinking. And for me, it wasn't about being popular. I was a very popular kid in high school. I had a lot of friends. I was very liked. I got along with everybody. So it wasn't a popular thing. It literally was just let me get it out of my system. So I started to drink at the parties. And I found that once I started drinking, this barrier fell. And I was like, well, what else is at this party? I might as well get it in and have fun this year. So I started smoking pot, started taking hits of LSD, mushrooms, pain pills if they were around. There was a good 5 to 6 months where PCP was readily available. So I started smoking PCP when I could. Pretty much anything that was available in my local county, I tried. I did stay away from cocaine and heroin, though. I had a kind of a stigma thing. I'm not doing cocaine or heroin. I'm better than that. But I'll smoke. I'll smoke PCP. And jet fuel and bombing fluid and arsenic, whatever the hell was all in there. But don't give me no heroin or cocaine. So I was kind of an uppity druggie, if you will. But I tried everything that was available. Senior year I graduated, I go in the military, the drugs stopped. There was no more drugs after that. But once I graduated boot camp and I got stationed in North Carolina, when we got off at 4:00 during that day, we all left the bar. We all left the base and went to the bars. And the bars around the military base, their motto was, if you're old enough to take a bullet for the country, you're old enough to have a cold beer. So we would get served at 18, 19, 20 years old. We would go in, simply order the beer, and their only rule was once you order it, you have to drink it or set it down at a table. You couldn't stand at the bar with a beer in your hand in case an authority figure walked in. So you could order it, go back to a table, take a drink, and sit it back down at the table, just so if somebody came in, it wasn't in your possession. You could be standing around a table, but just as long as it wasn't in your possession. And we would see our sergeants at these bars who are late 20s, early 30s. And they would just tell us, don't get in trouble, don't get locked up, make sure your ass is up at 3:30 in the morning, at formation at 4 and ready to go running. Other than that, have a good time. So it wasn't a deterrent for us as underage kids to, you guys shouldn't be drinking. It was
Right.
almost a badge of honor. It was almost like, okay, can you guys party as hard as you train? And if so, let's see how. So that went on my entire career in the military. We would get off at 4 o'clock. We'd go to the bars, go to the strip clubs. Weekend come, we would go to Myrtle Beach for the weekend, go to the bars, go to the strip clubs. Be back at formation at 4 o'clock Monday morning. That's literally what I did every single day for the entire time I was in the Marine Corps. I became a raging alcoholic in the Marine Corps.
Mm. Wow.
That's when it really started. And I get out, I come home, I'm 20, 21-ish. And the first month was great. I was like, I don't have to get up at 4 o'clock. I don't have to go running. I don't have to shave and shower. I got to cut my hair today. The second month came and I kind of got that oh shit factor. I'm back living at my mom's house. I don't have a vehicle. I don't have a job. I got to find something to do because I'm no longer in the military. I'm losing my identity.
Right.
Because
Because you could justify work hard, play hard while everybody
absolutely.
was doing it around you, but then come home.
Yeah, now I'm sitting at the bedroom where I grew up in high school with no job, no car. I'm out of the Marine Corps, so I feel as if I'm better than most people. I had that ego with me. I'm better than most people. I've done more things than a lot of people do in their entire life in the last couple of years. So I had that 10 foot tall and bulletproof kind of an attitude. That third month comes, and I get severely depressed. I didn't leave my room. I wasn't showering. I wasn't shaving. I was
Let
drinking
me
every
ask you.
day.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay. So yeah, those months, did you continue on drinking, or what was your chemical intake like through those months?
So as soon as I came home, the drinking never stopped. No matter, I mean, I do remember coming home and being able to buy beer and coming home with like a case, and my mom being like, "What you having a party or something?" I'm like, "No, this is for me for the next day or two." Really, Tim? I'm like, "Yeah, I drink now." Her seeing me drink as much as I did, I remember her saying, "So I sent you away to the military for you to come home an alcoholic." And I was cussing. Every other word was F. Every other word was, we just cussed a lot in the military. Every other word was a cuss word. That's just how we. So I'm coming home, I'm cussing out. Every third word's a cuss word, and I'm drinking like a fish. And I remember her looking really, really disappointed. Like, this is what I sent you away from. Like, you came back as a belligerent alcoholic. And I started smoking pot because I didn't have any drug tests to do. And I would get a hold of my buddies and see if they had any painkillers, and I would take some of those. So yeah, by that third month, I was drinking heavily every day. I was smoking pot, and when I could get my hands on pain pills, I'd be taking them as well. That wasn't readily available as much, but I would be taking them if my buddies had them, and I'd go to a
Mhm.
party and they had them there. I would take them. Eat some mushrooms every once in a while, but that wasn't something that was all around all the time. That was like a seasonal thing. But that third month came in, and I got severely depressed. I didn't want to leave my room. I didn't want to shower. I didn't want to shave. I didn't want to talk to nobody. And I was sitting in my room drinking and smoking pot. And I remember thinking, what's my purpose? What am I here for? I'm
Mm.
no longer in the military. I don't have a job. I'm a loser. I can't even help my mom out with grocery or electric bill because I don't have a job.
Yeah.
So I go into my father's armoire and I grab his Glock and I sit it on my lap and I'm crying and I'm looking at the gun. I don't know what to do. Thankfully, I had the right mind to call my girlfriend at the time. And I called her and I said, "Hey, something is wrong. I'm sitting here looking at a gun in my lap. I don't know what I'm doing." Within 5 minutes, she was at my house. She came over. She took the gun from me, put it back in the armoire. And that evening, when my mother came home from work, I told her, I said, "Mom, something's wrong. I'm not feeling normal. I need to go see somebody because I think something bad's going to happen." I didn't tell her I had my stepfather's gun in my lap. She would have freaked out,
Yeah.
had me
Yeah.
committed, the whole, hospitalization. But we did go to the doctors that week, and they confirmed that I had bipolar 1 manic depressive disorder, possibly PTSD. Their first solution, like most doctors, was to put me on medicine to combat my chemical imbalance of bipolar manic depressive. And I want to tell people that are listening, if a doctor's prescribing you medicines, whether it's psychological or for your health reasons, high blood pressure, heart disease, liver, whatever it is, please be honest with your doctors. I wasn't honest with them. I wasn't telling them I was drinking every day. I was smoking pot, taking pain pills when I could. So when I went there and they put me on these prescription medicines, when I would go back for my update 30 or 60 days, whenever it was, and they would ask me, how am I would say, I'm getting worse. These medicines aren't working. I don't understand why. So they would change my milligrams, or they would change the medicines. They would add another medicine, and they never really could pinpoint why these medicines weren't working. Well, the fact of the matter is, I had drugs and alcohol in my system, and it didn't matter what medicines they put me on. It didn't matter what cocktail. It didn't matter what milligrams. The medicines were never going to work because the drugs and the alcohol in my system were combating what they were made to do, and they were never going to work.
Yeah.
That went on from the age of 21 all the way up until the age of 44 when I finally went to rehab.
Wow.
On and off medicines, on and off different dosages, milligrams, cocktails. And I never wanted to admit it was the drugs and the alcohol, which drove me to think I was insane at some points. Why isn't this medicine working? I'm so messed up in the head. They can't figure it out. When it was so simple to the fact that I was an alcoholic and drug addict. But I never wanted to admit it. I didn't want to take accountability for my own actions. It couldn't be the drugs and alcohol. It had to be the medicines that they're prescribing me. Or I'm just completely batshit insane that nothing's ever going to help me. So why am I even living at this point?
You know, I have to say, I think that I really think that any addict, potential person struggling with addiction can probably identify. I know I can with what you just said, because when I got the latter part of time before getting sober for me, I was using, like half to a whole handle of whiskey a day, and like, I don't know, 300 milligrams of Adderall. So might as well have been doing meth. I was sleeping once every 3 days, and I was getting nerve damage because of it. So like my fingers and my toes were going just numb, constant. Like I was losing feeling, and so of course I took to Google, and there were two answers that I found, and one was that it was cancer, and the other was that you are. I remember specifically the message that somebody said. It was one of those, like, it was like Reddit or something. Like, this was like 12 years ago, so I don't know what Reddit was around then, but it was a forum, and it was either like somebody in recovery or professional saying, like, if you're experiencing these symptoms and you are somebody who drinks a lot of alcohol, uses substances, this is a result from that, and you're probably lying to yourself, and you may be too far at this point when your body is experiencing this. I hope that you get help soon if you're reading this. And I just that made such an imprint on me, and yet I still was like, oh yeah, no, that's not me. I probably have cancer. I literally went away from, no, the message number one that I found from Google is, I probably have cancer. So I'm just going to continue. So I'm just going to continue on drinking and using because I've had cancer, and, so
cunning and manipulative.
Yeah. Right. Man.
Yes. Twists everything.
Man, it really does. And to our own, like, my gosh, people see on the outside, those people who love us and people who don't love us, people who've lost love for us, see on the outside all the lies and the webs that we create. Little do they have any idea, like, there's almost a more intense web of lies that we're literally believing ourselves inside, potentially more intense than the ones that we're like telling everybody else outside. Like it's internal and it's external.
100%.
Man.
Anything to keep that drug and alcohol going that we tell ourselves. Anything.
Yep. Yeah, totally. So when you think about that, you just described a 20-year period, well, you outlaid a 20-year period where using drinking, trying to manage your symptoms of, mental health issues with outside substances, which obviously didn't work so well. Like when you think about, and not to just talk about war stories, but what are some of the biggest consequences you can think about when that over that 20-year period that you lost that? I mean, whatever, you name it. I'm always interested to hear that piece, because I think a lot of times we talk about people's story and we really, really rush to get to the solution. But I know that, like, for me, when I was struggling, I could identify with the struggle of other people. I can't identify with the solution yet. So when you were struggling over those 20 years, what were some of those biggest things for you that you look back on and you're like, so cringeworthy and it hurts so bad?
From the time I got out of the Marine Corps up until maybe 5 years ago, I went through 46 employments.
Wow.
And some of those jobs, I had great opportunity to advance and make a career out of and really have a stable lifestyle. And I'd blow it through drugs and alcohol and not properly being able to take care of my bipolar disorder because of drugs and alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
So I would have a job for 3 to 6 months and then just literally quit, not show up, call out sick, or just tell myself, this isn't for me. I'm going to go get another job. I would justify why I don't want to work there anymore so I can go find another job. And this went on for most of my life. Now, thank God, the last 10 years I've been in the carpentry field, but it has been with 5 different companies because I decided to become a subcontractor and work for myself. So when I got bored with working with a company, I'd be like, you know what? This is going to be our last project together. I had another company call me. I'm going to go start working some projects with them. And I was kind of fire myself and go to work for another company instead of always getting fired. And that was the biggest thing. I've probably lost a couple $100,000 jobs from my addiction and my mental illness. But I can't look at that now and say, what if?
Right.
I can't say, well, if I would have kept that job, I could have been making $250,000 now. I wouldn't be this person.
No.
I wouldn't have learned what life had to teach me. I wouldn't have learned what God had in store for me.
Yep.
I would have not been this grateful to how special this life is, how precious this life is. I would have still been taking everything for granted.
Do you know how many times parents come to me and say, like, it's in a situation like yours, if your mom had come to me and said, like, Tim is doing all of these things and losing all these opportunities and and all this stuff. And from the outside, the normal brain looks at that and goes, look at all this loss. Look at all the heartache that this is causing. But as I hear this, just what you said, like that, this is this path that's leading to you, the lesson you had to learn. This is a gift.
100%.
And we don't know that until we get a perspective shift. We don't know that till the other side.
No,
and
I remember at the age of 2021, I was working for 84 Lumber Company. I became one of the youngest co-managers. At 20 years old, I was making like $65,000 a year, and we're talking late 90s. So I was making good money at 20 years old, 21 years old. It was the first job I got out of coming out of the Marine Corps. And I remember going to the therapist. My mom went with me. And I remember telling him, I'm only making $60,000 a year. And I remember him looking at me and saying, you're 20. You're almost going to 21 years old. You're making $60,000 a year. What else do you want? Right. And I remember telling him, well, I want a BMW by my birthday this year. And him shaking his head being, Tim, he's like, some people are in their 40s and they're not making $65,000 a year. And I remember having that conversation, and I remember me telling him, well, it's not enough. I have to do more. And I'm telling myself early on in my life, saying that I've got to do more. I'm worth more. I deserve more. I'm putting this on myself. Like, look at me. I deserve more. I'm owed this.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I wasn't owed a damn thing. Everything that I have now, I have had to earn. And most of it was a 27-year battle with mental illness and addiction that I'm so grateful for now. And I want to, you said
Loss is the greatest teacher for people like you, right?
I'm hard-headed. I always have been. My mom would say, if you would just have listened to me from all the things I say not to do, instead of you having to go out and learn the lesson yourself, we could have shaved half of your life away. And I'm like, yeah, but Mom, I have to learn it for myself.
Mm-hmm.
I have to know it's real. I have to understand the consequences for myself. Yes, I wish I would have listened to you on a couple of occasions, but I don't know it unless I know it.
Mm-hmm.
Now I know what heartache and disappointment and almost dying does to me, and now I know why I'm sharing. You said how it twists and manipulates, and I'll tell you a really quick story. In my 30s, I lost another job, and my wife's looking at me. She's like, "What are you doing? What's going on?" And I'm like, I miss sports. I want to compete again." And she's like, "What do you want to do?" I'm like, "I want to do mixed martial arts." And she's like, "Okay, I'll give you a year. Go pursue this dream. Go do it. After a year, if you're not making any money, you got to let it go. You got to get another job. We have 2 girls now. I have 2 daughters at this time." She's like, and then we move on. We go back to paying our bills. So that 1 year actually ended up turning into a 3-year mixed martial arts career where I fought up and down the East Coast, fought on TV. I got sponsors. I was making okay money, not a lot of money, but I had my self-esteem. I had my self-worth. I was back at the gym. Felt important. That last fight of mine was in Atlantic City at Harris Casino, and I ended up tearing my rotator cuff.
Oh.
Having to have major reconstructive surgery on my right rotator cuff, which laid me up for 9 months, which started a 4.5-year-long opioid prescription addiction to Oxycontins that were given to me by the doctor. Now, thankfully, they've changed their perimeters now where it's a lot harder to get a prescription from the doctor, which is great. But when this happened, I was 35. I'm 46, so this is 11 years ago. I could just go to my primary doctor and say, "It's not working. I need more."
Yep.
And he would just write my prescription, and out the door I went. It comes to the end of the 4 year of my pain pill taking, and I'm drinking 12 to 18 beers a day. I'm taking 8 to 10, 20 milligram Oxycontins. I'm smoking probably about a quarter of weed a day. So I had a good little trifecta going on for a couple of years that made me feel normal. And I remember sitting on my bed one day and I got scared. I'm like, man, I'm going to take this pain medicine and drink my beers one night, and I'm not going to wake up because this is what happens. People get used to taking this medicine and drinking their beers and feeling as if, oh, this is the norm for me.
Right.
And then they go to sleep and they don't wake up the next day.
Yeah.
And my addictive personality, my mental illness step in and say, well, screw that. If we're going to die from pain pills and alcohol, you might as well do it yourself. So I reach over on my dresser and I open up my pain bottle and I dump it out of my hand. I have 18 20 milligram Oxycontins. I take all 18 of them. I go out into the living room and I open up a 12-pack of beer and I guzzle all 12 of them within like 45 minutes. I go into my bedroom and I lay on the bed and I say, God, please don't let me wake up tomorrow because I can't stop drinking and drugging. I just want the pain to go away and I don't know how. And I pass out. I wake up the next day, like 16, 18 hours later. I remember it was evening time the next day. And my first thought was to get up and go into the bathroom. I open up my refill bottle and I dump the entire thing down the toilet.
Wow.
My second thought was, holy shit, I didn't die. I remember looking in the mirror and telling myself, I don't care how bad this gets. I'm never taking pain medicine again for the rest of my life. And for the next 10 days, I was the sickest I think I've ever been in my entire life. The full gambit of coming off of opioids, And the throwing up, the sickness, the insomnia, the night sweats, the tears, the panic attacks, anxiety, the flu-like fever and the jitters and the chills. But every day when I woke up, I looked in the mirror between the crying and the throwing up and the snotting, telling myself, remember this feeling, remember this feeling. We're never doing this again. March 15th, 2017 was at the end of the 10 days. 16th, I wake up and I'm like, I got to go for a ride to clear my head because I've been in the house for 10 days getting sick as a dog and I just want to be outside. So I get in my truck and I go driving through this reservoir, which is a beautiful place down here in Maryland where you can go hiking and biking and walk your dog and go fishing. It's a really beautiful place called Loch Raven Reservoir. And I'm driving through the park and I'm crying and I'm looking up at the sky and I'm like, why did I live? What's my purpose? Why are you, if something so great and powerful loves me so much, why am I suffering so bad? What are you doing to me? What did I do to deserve this? Why do you hate me so much? Asking all these questions of why. And I get around to this tree on this bend where December 27th, 1996, my best friend at the age of 18 lost control of his vehicle and hit the tree and unfortunately died at the age of 18. And at this tree, his parents put a picture up on him, and there's a book there still to this day, and you can write to him, and you just kind of like go to the tree and speak to him. And I get out of my truck, I go up to the tree, and I'm crying. I'm like, Bill, I'm an alcoholic. I'm an addict. I don't know my purpose. I don't know why I'm here. Please just send me a sign that I'm not alone, that there's something else out there besides myself, because I have lost faith. I truly don't believe that something great and powerful that loves me so much would allow me to suffer so bad if there was something actually out there other than myself. And I go to leave the park, and I'm crying and snotting. So I pull over on the side of the road to collect myself. But I don't pull over on the right-hand side of the road, which is the way I'm driving out. I pull over on the wrong side, facing oncoming traffic. Crying, I'm wiping my eyes, blowing my nose, and 10 minutes goes by, and then his car pulls up right in front of me. So since I'm on the wrong side of the road, we're facing windshield. And I see this man get out of his vehicle. He opens up the back door. He grabs his dog. He's about to walk across the street where the water is. And I'm looking at him. I'm like, man, that guy looks familiar. This is March 16th, 2017. It finally dawns on me. It's my best friend who I just talked to at the tree who died in 1997. This was his father, whom I haven't seen since the day of my best friend's funeral 21 years ago. And I get out and I look at him and I say, Mr. Bill, is that you? And he turns around and looks at me. He's like, Timmy, what's wrong? And I fall to the curb and I start crying. I'm an alcoholic. I'm an addict. I don't know why I survived taking all those painkillers. I don't know why I'm here. I don't know my purpose. And he walks over to me and he sets his hand on my shoulder and he looks at me and he says, Timmy, I'm not supposed to be here this morning. I'm supposed to be in South Carolina on a family reunion trip. I was supposed to leave at 6 a.m. this morning. My wife came to me in a dream last night and told me to come to this park at 10 a.m. I believe I was sent here to see you. And I said, Mr. Bill, I just stopped at Billy's tree and asked him for a sign that I wasn't alone, that there was something else out there. And he says, Timmy, everything is going to be okay. We're being watched over. We're being protected. And we hug. And I go to leave the park. And I have about 10 minutes of this. Everything's going to be okay. I'm all right. I'm being protected. And just like that, my addiction steps in and says, you are being protected. Everything is going to be all right. Nothing is going to happen to you. So you can continue to live your life the way you are living.
Yep.
And the next 4 years of my life, I drank the most alcohol I've ever drank in my entire life. The 12 to 18 beers weren't enough. I switched over to the Fireball whiskey. And I started off, and again, my manipulative, addictive brain would tell me not to buy a big bottle of whiskey because then I would have accountability and know exactly how much whiskey I was drinking throughout the day. So I had to buy the little miniatures. Yep. I could easily drink them, throw them out the window while I was driving, have them in my sock drawer in the medicine cabinet, And nobody would really have a gauge on how much I was drinking because they were so tiny, I could get rid of them. So I started off with getting like 5 or 6 in the morning. I'd still drink my 12 to 18. And then eventually the 12 to 18 went away. And at 7 a.m. in the morning, I'd stop and get a sleeve of Fireball miniatures, which is 10 of them. I would drink all 10 of them by 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I'd get off work at 3:30, go immediately to the first liquor store that was close to the job site. I'd pick up another 10. I would slam 5 of those before I even walked in the front door from work. I would drink those other 5 by 8 o'clock, and by 8:30, I'd be back at the liquor store getting another 10. The last year and a half of my addiction, I was drinking 25 to 30 Fireball miniatures every single day. And one day I figured, I wonder how much alcohol is in it. In a Fireball miniature, there are 2.5 shots in each bottle. So 2.5 times 30 is upwards of 65 to 80 shots of Fireball whiskey I was drinking every single day for over a year and a half. I was killing myself.
Yeah. Yeah. Holy cow. So I want to step back just a second real quick. When you were on opiates, you tried to take your own life. Did anybody know that happened? Was he the only person you had told at that point? And then, that 10-day period where you're coming off of it, like what was, were you open with that, with your mom, with your wife? I mean, what was the situation there?
So my wife had an idea that I took a bunch of pain pills the night before. I didn't disclose her how many. I remember us getting into an argument, and I'm like, I'm taking a bunch of pain pills and drinking a bunch of beer and going to bed. And she was just like, fine, I don't care anymore. I had put this woman through so much stuff at that point. She was so angry at me. She was writing me off at this point.
Yeah.
And she was like, I don't care what you do. Go ahead. You're killing yourself. Go ahead. So it was more of an anger thing. It wasn't a sympathy. Oh my God, I can't believe you. And the next day when I woke up and I remember telling her I'm not taking pain medicine anymore, she was like, well, you're going to get exactly what you deserve. It was that part in our relationship where she was so angry at me that, well, you're going to get what you deserve. Good. That's what you get for taking all those pain medicines and drinking all those beers. You're going to be sick as a dog, and I'm not helping you do a goddamn thing. It was to that point, unfortunately, in our relationship.
Yeah.
But other than her kind of knowing, because I didn't disclose exactly what I did.
Right.
Mr. Bill was the first person I told that to.
Wow.
And my mom didn't know I did that until I started doing these podcasts last year. She had no idea.
Wow.
I didn't tell anybody else. I wasn't ready.
At that point, though, you were done with the opiates, but just went full-fledged alcohol, right? For 4 years.
Yeah.
Not like that's not enough, because I mean, woo, yeah. And so, are you working through those 4 years? What is?
Yeah, I'm still being a carpenter. I'm still working. Matter of fact, I had a really good contract with a company. I worked 2.5 years with them doing the same. We were remodeling apartment buildings, and the gentleman running it had no idea that I was a raging alcoholic. I remember when it came down to that last year, right before I went into rehab, he pulled me in and was like, what's going on? Your productivity is going down. Your quality's going down. You're missing a lot of work. Everything okay at home? I'm like, yeah, everything's good. I just got really stressed at the house. Come up with any excuse. My daughter just had my grandson. They had to move back in with us. I'm taking care of a full family now. Anything other than, I'm drinking a shit ton of alcohol every single day.
Right.
But when it finally came down to I had to go to rehab, and I told him, I said, I got need help. I got to go. And he was like, for what? I'm like, alcoholism. He's like, it's that bad? I was like, yeah. I said, I never would have guessed it. He said, I really thought you were going through some stuff at home. He said, I never would have pinpointed the fact that you were drinking that much. He said, you actually hit it very well, surprisingly enough, for a very long time. He said, I can't believe I didn't see that. So again, that's where the master manipulator comes in the addiction. We do whatever we can to hold off as much as possible for anybody finding out. When usually the fact of the matter is we're the last one to find out and everybody else knows.
Right.
But that was my employment. That was my job. So I made sure I took a shower every morning, make sure I had my gum in my mouth, make sure I always had my fresh haircut, looked proper. But as soon as the door shut and I started working on my stuff, here come my miniatures, and I start swinging on them throughout the day. Just make sure, the funny thing is, I never liked big red gum, but I did when I drank Fireball whiskey because it smells and tastes exactly like the Fireball, so people would just think you were drinking or eating big red gum all day. You find these little things to keep your addiction.
Oh yeah, dude. Do you remember those drinks called Sparks? I don't know if they're around anymore. It was a malt.
I vaguely do. Yeah.
It was an orange energy drink, malt. I mean, it's higher alcohol content than I think a regular beer or whatever. And I mean, it was like Tang, and very orange. Anyway, I would fill my Nalgene bottle with them and tell everybody it was Gatorade.
Oh gosh,
my mouth would be orange every day. Yeah. So I totally get it. You go to that place and just whatever you can make sense of, and then that's the story. That's the narrative.
Yeah, that's it. And I'm sticking to it.
And so you made the decision. You came to the conclusion and said, like, this is enough. I've got to get help.
So no. That was the end result of me telling them I had to go away. So that last year of my addiction, I was out of control. I was batshit insane. I really was. My life became unmanageable, and I was 100% powerless over alcohol. So I get this brand new truck. I had it a month. I'm leaving the liquor store, and I hit something. I still to this day do not have any recollection of what I hit. I don't know if it was a parked car, a concrete barrier. I have no idea. But I remember pulling into my driveway and walking in the front door and telling my wife, I hit something. I'm not dealing with this shit tonight. I'm going to bed. And I pass out. I wake up the next morning like a typical blackout drunk. Hey, good morning, everybody. I'm going to run to the grocery store and get milk and bread. Anybody need anything else for breakfast? And my wife looks at me and she says, how are you going to do that? I said, in my truck in the driveway. She says, go outside and look at your truck. So I go outside. I get around to the passenger side of my truck. My mirror's completely off the truck, and my front right tire is hanging off the rim, and it's pushed up underneath the front bumper. I literally don't know how I drove it home, other than I had that pucker up, oh shit factor. I better get this to my driveway before the cops come and tow it, and I get a DUI. And luckily, the liquor store is literally a half a block down the street. I can see it through my front door. So I know I got my truck and said, oh shit, I'm driving it home, and drove it home. I'm sitting there looking at it, and my wife pops her head out the front door and she says, you have no memory of what you hit last night, do you? And I said, no, I don't. She said, you could have killed yourself. You could have killed somebody else. You can't stay here anymore. I don't want you around our girls. You have to leave and go figure this out, but I don't want you in this house anymore. So I called AAA. They came over and put my spare tire on my truck. And I call my buddy. I'm like, hey, can I come over to your house for a couple of days? Let things blow over. Give her 4 or 5 days. She'll get over it. I'll be back. Right. I'll be back in the house and drinking again. Nothing's going to change. She'll get over it.
Yeah.
So I get to my buddy's house, and this is a Friday night, and he's like, well, man, you just got kicked out of your house. It's Friday night. You might as well go to the bar. And I'm like, you know what? Hell yeah. Because now I have a legitimate reason to go drinking, right? My wife just kicked me out of the house. I can't go back home and screw this. I want to go drink because I just got kicked out of my house. So we go to the bar, get shit-faced. As I'm leaving the bar less than 12 hours later, I rear-end somebody at the red light.
Wow.
And I get out, and luckily this guy had a tow hitch on the back of his vehicle. So his vehicle actually had no scratches on it. But his tow hitch now was rammed up into my front bumper. My front bumper was all smashed in. So I get out, and I'm like, are you okay? He's like, yeah, I'm fine, actually. I said, your truck's okay. You're okay. He said, yeah. I said, good. I'm out of here. I slapped him on his back. I reversed my truck, and I took off. I knew if the cops came, I was going to jail. My truck was getting impounded. So I get back to my friend's house, and I said, I can't stay here, man. I just got to go be by myself. I just want to be by myself and think about what's going on in my life, how bad it's gotten. So I leave his house. I stop at the liquor store. I get myself 2 sleeves of Fireball whiskey, and I go and I park my vehicle at a park and ride where people park their vehicle for the day and catch a train or whatever to their jobs. And I turn my phone off. And I sit in the back seat of my truck for 48 hours. No contact with anybody. Drinking and passing out, drinking and passing out, throwing up, passing out, drinking, turn my radio on, listening to sad ass music, and just going through all the disappointments I've done in my life, all the opportunities that I messed up, all the arguments that I've caused, all the turmoil I've caused within my family, that my kids would be better off without me as a father. My wife would be better off without me as a husband. My mom and my dad deserve a better son. Just really putting myself through the whole ringer of why I really honestly don't deserve to be living at this moment. And what a great disappointment I am as a human being. And just going through it for 48 hours. Finally, that second day, I turned my phone on at 7 after 10 on the morning of March 5th, 2021. And 2 minutes later, the phone rings after it being off for 48 hours. And I look down and it says Westchester, Pennsylvania. I'm like, who the hell is this? And I pick it up. It's my childhood friend, Brandon Novak, on the other line. And he says, Lodgen, what the fuck are you doing? And I said, I'm cold, I'm hungry, I'm drunk, and I'm tired. And he says, good, motherfucker. That's what you need. He said, I just got off the phone with your wife and your mom. I have a plane ticket set for you this evening at 8:30. I got you into Banyan Treatment Centers down West Palm Beach, Florida. I want you to get on that plane and go get your life back. And I'm kind of like on the other line. I'm like, okay. I'm just agreeing with him basically so I can hang up the phone. Because I really didn't want to hear that I have to go to a rehab. So I'm like, okay. And I hang up the phone. My wife calls me like 5 minutes later. Hey, I just got off the phone with Brandon. Please come home, pack your bags, take a shower, try to eat something and take a nap. I had about 4 hours before I went to the airport. I'm like, okay, I'll come home. So I go home, I take a shower, I pack my bags. I couldn't eat and I couldn't take a nap. My anxiety is through the roof. My racing thoughts. Holy shit, I got to go to rehab in Florida? He didn't tell me how long. How long am I going? 30, 60, 90 days? It is a 6-month program? Like, how did I get myself into this? How has my life become so unmanageable that I now have to go to rehab in the state of Florida away from my family? And I don't understand why, and I don't understand how, or how. And I'm sitting on the edge of my bed, and I'm trying to talk myself out of it. I can't go. I got a job. You know, my kids need me. And now I'm trying to convince myself that I'm worth staying around. I can't go. I got a job. I can't do this. I can't do this. And one last time, my addiction steps in and says, you're right. You can't do this. But if you come with me, I can ease the pain. I walk into the basement of my home. I throw a rope around my neck. And I stand up on a bucket. And my addiction tells me to step off and just kill the pain. And I listen. And I go into the basement of my home. I throw a rope around my neck, stand up on a bucket. And I'm hysterically crying. I'm about to step off. And my wife realizes I'm not in the bedroom. She literally comes down at the exact moment when I was thinking about stepping off. And she says, what are you doing? I said, I can't do it. I can't go. I just want the pain to go away. And I don't know how. She says, Tim, do you know what this would do to your little girls? Please get down and get on that plane. Get on that plane and everything is going to be okay. About 30 seconds go by. I take the rope from around my neck and I fall to the floor of the basement of my home. I cry for about 5 minutes. And then I go upstairs and I pick up my phone. And I call Brandon. And I say, hey, buddy, I'm going, man. I got to go. If I don't go tonight, this disease is going to kill me. And all he says is, I'm proud of you. I love you. Call me when you pass security. I want to make sure you're actually getting on the plane. I said, okay. And I hang up. My mom takes me to the airport a couple hours later. I get past security and I call him and say, hey, buddy, I got 35 minutes left before I board the plane. Just want to let you know I'm all ready to go. I'm going to board. And all he says is, I'm proud of you. I love you. You're about to get back everything that you've ever lost times 10. And he hangs up the phone. What happened next was the most amazing thing that's ever happened to me in my entire life. As I go to sit down at this chair waiting for them to call me to board this plane, as I sit down at the seat at this airport, I get this overwhelming feeling of hope that engulfs my entire body. It was a warm blanket feeling, more than any drug or any alcohol has ever given me. My body was hot, I was tingly, and at that exact moment, my fear, my panic, my worry, my doubt, and I truly believe my addiction left my body all at once. And I hear this woman's voice that I've never heard before and I've never heard since. She simply says, everything is going to be okay. It was the most amazing experience I've ever had in my entire life. I truly believe I had a spiritual experience at that airport. And I finally knew at the age of 44 years old, after battling this addiction and this mental illness for 27 years, that I was right where I needed to be to save my life at the exact moment that was needed to save my life. Because when I got to rehab and they took all my vitals and they did all the blood and everything, they called me in and they said, how old are you? I said, I'm 44. And he asked me how much I drank and I told him. And he says,
Were you honest?
yeah, actually, yeah. I was like, this is it. I'm 100% honest. And he said, your blood pressure is 167 over 145. You're at the verge of having a stroke.
Wow.
Your liver and kidneys are 4 times what they need to be. They're on the verge of shutting down. He's like, you're having heart palpitations. He's like, if you would have waited 1 more month, even if you would have stopped drinking and not seeked medical attention, he said, you would have died of alcoholism by the age of 47 years old. He said, I don't know how or why you got in here at this exact moment. He said, but this was exactly the moment you needed to save your life and for everything to be reversed. I stopped believing in coincidences when all these things started to line up for me. And as I worked the steps of recovery and read and got my faith back of a higher power, it was then my perspective changed. And I understand that those 27 years didn't happen to me. It happened for me. It happened for me to become the man I was always meant to be. But I couldn't become this man unless I went through hardships and adversity. You know, I used to ask for courage, and I didn't understand that to have courage, I had to be put through situations in my life where I had to be courageous. He didn't just give them to me. And boy, did he give me a lot of situations to be courageous and strong. And I'm truly grateful to be alive today. I'm truly grateful that I finally understand that was a lesson I was being taught, not a punishment.
Mm-hmm.
It was happening for me, not to me. And I'm grateful that it did, because it allows me to let other people know that they're not alone, that they don't suffer alone. What they're going through, there's other people, believe it or not, that understand. You're not alone. Don't be ashamed of what you're going through. You are not a burden to anybody else. Don't ever say, I'm a burden. I don't want to tell somebody my problems. Believe it or not, the person you might be speaking to might know exactly what you're going through, and he or she may just have that one sentence that you need to hear to change your perspective.
That's so true. You know, going back to, what we were talking about at the very beginning, our moms telling us we were destined for something great to help change people's lives and everything. And look at the two of us now, using our experience to just do what we can to spread the message. And I can't think of a better thing that I would rather be doing than, sharing hope, because
it's
just
amazing.
goes on and on.
The feeling I get back from sharing, there's no amount of money that can be put on it. There's no fame to it. It's a feeling inside of my heart and my soul that I'm finally doing something right with my life, and it's helping other people. And isn't that what ultimately we're supposed to be doing, is we help each other?
Absolutely. So, people say, what is the point of telling stories and what have you? Because stories don't get people sober. Well, the truth of the matter is, for somebody like me, when I was already like in early sobriety, I really had a hard time attaching myself to any modality or even 12 steps or whatever, just because like my brain was trashed. But at speaker meetings, and when somebody would tell their story, my attention would get grabbed. And so I would start to pay attention because I could identify with their bullshit,
Yeah.
all the stuff they went through, right? Like, and that hooked me in. And once I got hooked in, I could hear about what it was they did. And it might be one thing that I would take away from that story that I would hear that that was helpful in doing that one day at a time. So the power of sharing stories is not, in my opinion, a self-fulfilling, prideful, look at what I did. It is pure and meaningful from a place of I've been there and I know how important it can be in someone's life for them to say yes. We have to say yes every single day, especially in early recovery.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because there's so
100%.
many, just that like you talk about you mentioned so many times how the disease, will be rational for 1 second and say, yes, I agree, this is bad, I'm in a horrible place, and then all of a sudden, millisecond later, you turn it on its head, and the narrative, we're so easily deceived, and that narrative changes. And so yeah, it's an everyday thing. So, I mean, I don't know about you, but I've got to continue getting encouraged every day. It's not like 12 years later for me doing this. Oh man, I love it. Like the rest of my day is going to be so much better because of Tim. And, I mean it. I mean it. It's a beautiful thing, the gift of recovery, and the fact that we get to share it and on these platforms, in person. But I love the technological aspect that we're getting to do these days. Kind of one of the things, gifts from COVID for this podcast.
Right.
I know we're running close on time, and I wanted to ask you. So, you truly have become a world changer in a new way since becoming sober. So, like, how, besides sharing your story in these ways, what are you doing in the world of recovery and giving back to others?
Yeah, it's been a true gift. Recovery has given me more than my. I told my buddy, he lied to me. I'm like, you didn't give me back 10 times. He said, I've gotten back 100 times more than I ever could imagine. My life today through recovery has opened up more doors, I believe, in the last 22 months than my whole life, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm legitimately serious about that. I first started doing podcasts about 6 months in, which opened up me to just reach more people. Speaking to you today is my 94th podcast episode. I've been interviewed by 4 magazines sharing my story. 2 television articles or 2 television edit clips have been downloaded for me. I now get to work with 2 great nonprofit organizations that have found me through Instagram, seeing what I did and asking me to work with them. One is Rockstar Testimony, where we bring awareness to mental illness and addiction and PTSD trauma. It is founded by a woman named Sandra Lee and Dusty Simmers, and both of them have gone through PTSD, trauma, addiction, mental illness, and their goal now is to bring light to those who are in the dark. If you can take one candle and you can light a million candles off of one candle's flame,
Yep.
and that's what we're trying to do, is just light one more candle through our nonprofit. And they asked me, I'm a proud partner. And then I started working with a company called the Overwatch Collective, who are ran by 2 former Marine Corps veterans. And they bring awareness to first responders, fire, police, EMT, and military veterans, mental illness, addiction, and suicide prevention. Because as we know, military members, they
Yeah.
say 22 members a day, but I honestly believe it's probably double that. to
Mhm.
be quite honest with you. Through these two nonprofit organizations, I've been able to travel to the United States and speak at events. Just a couple months ago, I was in Half Moon Bay, California. They flew me out there, put me up in a hotel, and I was able to speak at this fundraiser to the military veterans and first responders about how my addiction and my mental illness almost took my life,
Yeah.
and then how precious our lives are.
When you say 22 people a day, what were you referring to?
The statistic is 22 veterans a day lose their life to suicide.
Mm. Wow. Wow.
I believe it's double that.
Yeah.
I truly do. I believe it's double that for the veterans. Again, I know what the military can do to you mentally.
Yep.
I was never in combat. I could imagine that is times 100.
Sure. Sure.
So, and for me, the only way for me to deal with my situations and the things I was going through was to drug or drink it out. And then you get to the point of depression where you're drugging and drinking so much and you feel as if you're not worth being around. So the only other option that you're telling yourself is to take yourself out.
Yep.
And I was able to speak to these veterans, some of them multiple combat veterans. And at the end of my speech, these grown men who had fought countless times in combat were coming up to me in tears, telling me that they just needed to hear that they weren't alone. They just needed to hear that there was somebody else out there who knew exactly what they're going through. And I can't tell you how many people came up to me and said, that's what I've always said. I just want the pain to go away and I don't know how.
Mm.
Because that's ultimately where you get to that hopelessness where you just want it to go away and you don't know how to deal with it.
Yeah.
The easiest way is to unfortunately commit suicide. So we brought awareness to those people. We were actually able to raise $65,000 that night through charity and raffle tickets. And we were able to put 11 military members and their spouses through therapy, got them in touch with therapists and be able to help them, because spouses of first responders and veterans and people who deal with mental illness, they go through it as well.
Oh, hell yeah.
Probably, if
Yeah.
not more.
Yeah.
I remember my wife saying one time, she said, wow, you don't let the wound heal before you cut it back open, do you? I'm like, what are you talking about? The things you said to me last night cut me to my heart.
Mm.
And my wound is not even healed yet, and you're saying more nasty things. She's like, when are you ever going to let it heal? So we put our spouses and family members through things that we're too selfish at that time to even comprehend.
Mm-hmm.
That whole thing about sticks and stones break my bones, but words will never hurt me is such a lie. Words stick with you forever, especially if it's coming from somebody who you dearly love or cherish or respect. And for them to say something that always sticks in your mind forever. Your bones heal, scratches
Yep.
heal, but those wounds internally that you hear from words, they're really hard to get over.
That's the truth. Absolutely. Wow. Those are two really amazing organizations, and sounds like with really great missions. We're gonna have all the information linked in the show notes so that you can check those out, and also connect with Tim as well on his platforms. Tim, is there anything you want to leave with the person or people that are watching or listening today that are saying, "Man, I identify so much with his story." What would be your last word of encouragement you'd like to leave with them?
Please know that what you're going through is not yours and yours alone. Please understand that there are so many of us out there dealing with mental illness and addiction and have had thoughts of suicide. Please know that there's help out there. There's people out there that truly understand what you're going through. You are not a burden to anybody on this earth. This world would not be a better place without you in it. You are an extremely loved, cared for, and special person that people want to continue to see you live. If you're dealing with any of these issues, please reach out, ask for help. If you want just a hug, just ask for a hug. Sometimes all we need is somebody to give us a hug. I'm proud of you. We're all proud of you. Don't ever forget how special you are, how much you're needed. And trust me, everything is going to be all right.
Absolutely. Tim, thank you so much. I can't thank you enough for getting so vulnerable and giving us the gift of your story today on our platform. It's really been an honor, and it's been an honor to share this time with each of you listening or watching as well. Thank you for joining us. And with that, I will close out how I always do and remind each of you that it is never too late to start loving yourself, and you're only ever one decision away from a completely different life.
For more information on today's episode, check out the show notes. Recovery Stories is brought to you by Promises Behavioral Health's rooted alumni community. If you or a loved one are struggling, have questions, or ready to take the next step, call our admission center at 888-648-4098. Or visit us online at www.promisesbehavioralhealth.com. Our team is ready and waiting to answer the call for help. Whether you're watching on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, or listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please share with your friends. Follow, subscribe, and leave us a review. We are grateful for you and hope that you have been encouraged by today's episode. As always, remember you are only one decision away from a completely different life, and it is never too late to start loving yourself.